Hello.
Hello. I'm Ann McElhinney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Ann Phelim Scoop.
And
It's July. It's the middle of July.
it's the middle of July. It's week 90 million of our 2-week lockdown. So what's on the show today? A great show. And who says we don't listen to our public?
Who says we don't listen to our public?
Who
And don't,
says that?
Who says that?
You.
You of little faith.
Yes. You asked.
You asked and we heard.
You demanded.
And we heard.
And we listened.
And we listened.
And we took action.
And we took action. You're going to find out exactly what that action was.
Yes, well, we will have, actually, I'll let them know. We're going to have Casey Diaz on the show. So stay tuned for that.
Yes.
And yes, Governor Gruesome is back in action. We bring you the latest California craziness.
Yes. But before we start today's show, we want to thank you so much for your support of our Independence Day Autonomous Zone.
Just to remind you, the Autonomous Zone. So we were banned from our beach on Independence Day here at Venice Beach. In fact, the whole of LA County, we were banned. And we noticed that if you declare it as a Black Lives Matter protest or declare an autonomous zone, the rules don't apply. You're allowed to go and protest and not socially distance and break curfews. So we declared Venice Beach an Independence Day autonomous zone. And
you were so appreciative, and we were on Fox News.
On the Laura Ingraham show. And we bought a big banner, which Casey Diaz made for us.
This is how we met Casey Diaz. It's a lovely story.
And so we made a little appeal last week. We were told you the banner cost almost $1,000. We had to pay for a drone. We had to pay to get people there. It was, to get down there, taxis, and all that thing. And so we asked for a little fundraiser. You've come up to the plate.
You're very kind.
But we still are always in need of funds to do other things,
yes,
and to still pay off those debts. So please give what you can to the unreportedstorysociety.com. Give what you can to the unreportedstorysociety.com, whatever you can afford.
Please.
We particularly like sustaining members.
We love our sustaining members.
We have many of them now.
We have. Mm-hmm. We're loving you guys. And you're going to get special treats because you're so kind and lovely.
So talking of the banner, so we should tell people how we met Casey Diaz, this person called Casey Diaz.
Yeah, because Magda went to get the banner. Magda found a sign shop here in Los Angeles, went to get the banner made. And as we told you this time last week, basically, Magda went in and she met this guy who had this incredible story to tell. And she came down to the beach with this fabulous banner and said, "You won't believe who I've just met." And she started to tell the story. She said he made her cry 3 times, which normally, by the way, we'd find very offensive and we'd be very cross about, except for that Magda was crying with inspiration and with, she just was lifted up very much by his story and by, everything that he had done. And I think we sort of told you about that. I think it's interesting. I think quite a number of you guys had actually heard of him before we had ever heard of Casey Diaz. And somebody pointed out, by the way, which I then discovered afterwards, that in fact our guest last week, Eric Metaxas, had famously interviewed Casey Diaz.
So Casey Diaz was a gangbanger, serving 13-year sentence from the age of 16, and inside converted to Christianity and changed the lives of hundreds and maybe thousands of people. That's a very bad rendition of an amazing story.
But you're going to hear that. You're going to hear that in
But last week we just mentioned Casey.
We just said, would any of you, do you guys think we should interview him? And it was like, and by the way, I want to thank Andrea Smith. Andrea was the one who pointed out that Eric Metaxas actually had him on his show.
And so someone called JKERFJKJJ said, absolutely have Casey Diaz on a future show. These are all the comments in the YouTube section. We do read them all, and we're going to respond to them all. And Kate McDonald said, buying Casey Diaz's book now.
Can't recommend the book enough.
Yes, the book is fantastic. It's called The Shot Caller. Judy Inbuden said, I would love to see you interview Casey Diaz. Philip Maccabee, no relation, would love to hear Mr. Diaz's story. And
Media Messengers said, I love stories like Diaz's. It's always amazing to me, the true before and after Lost and Found.
And Kelly Johnson said, yes, I'd love to see an interview with Casey Diaz. Just added his book to my Audible wish list. I mean, we have
Tanya
dozens.
DeRoll, yes, absolutely, you should interview Casey Diaz, and then, by the way, our dear friend Clay Stiles wrote and said, just bought If You Can Keep It. What a brilliant man, by the way. That was in reference to Eric Metaxas' book.
Yes.
Our good friend as well, Alana Bush, writing as well. and talking. And thank you very much, Alana, for picking up that phrase that Eric had used, the two courageous people describing Phelim and I, which was Eric Metaxas said about us, and we were very, very pleased about that. And yeah, and Don Reed saying, yes, please feature Casey Diaz. I read his book and give him a platform. Please read his book and give him a platform to put Jesus out there for a bit. What is there to lose?
So it just
on
goes
that,
on.
yeah, it goes on.
So please do know we do read all the YouTube comments.
And if you
please
have questions, we answer them as well on YouTube.
I'm going to go in after this actually and answer all and thank all these people for writing to us.
No, we're very appreciative.
And we are. So please, let's go over to the interview. We did it a little bit earlier with Casey.
You might notice we're wearing a different outfit, but that's just how we roll. It's a bit warm around here at the moment.
Yes. So let's hear that interview with Casey now.
So now we are joined by Casey Diaz, and how we know Casey is just this is the best story ever. And those of you who were watching the Scoop last week will remember that we had, or not even last week, sorry, 2 weeks ago, Magda, we decided to do an autonomous zone at Venice Beach to declare our independence of Gavin Newsom and all the draconian laws against freedoms. And we needed a big banner. And Magda found a banner shop. I don't even know how, but Magda is a miracle worker like that. And she walks into this banner shop in Burbank and she meets this man called Casey Diaz, and he starts to tell her his story, which we told you a little about in the Scoop last week. And we've decided to ask Casey to come on the show today. And Casey is the author of...
Well, we asked people, should we have Casey on?
Oh, yeah, we should. After we tell the story, we said to people, should we have Casey on? Everyone wrote and said...
So we'll have a look at the YouTube, at the comments on the YouTube of last week. It's, have Casey on, please have Casey on, please have Casey on. So, and that's, so it's a unanimous decision by our viewers. So
welcome, Casey.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. I really appreciate it.
So I want to start by just saying that Casey Diaz is the author of this book, which is The Shot Caller, a Latino gangbanger's miraculous escape from a life of violence to a new life in Christ. And if ever, it's exactly what it says. That is exactly what this book is. I read this book in one sitting yesterday. Casey, there's my notes.
I can see.
Don't worry, we only have half an hour or so.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that's part of the problem here, because I realized as I was making all these notes, I just could talk to you forever. But I want to just introduce you to the audience and find out and tell them who you are. So Casey came to the United States as a 2-year-old from El Salvador with his parents, and quite quickly had an unhappy childhood and quite quickly got into a life of crime. Can you take it from there? Tell us, how did you come to live in the United States and what happened to you?
Well, I came here when I was 2, as you mentioned, and we settled in the area of Los Angeles called the Rampart District. And predominantly at that time, very largely Salvadoran and Mexican. And then we would actually move from there to South Central Los Angeles, back and forth, but mainly in the Rampart District. And, it's one of those things where it's very common nowadays where, parents, let me retract that. It was a time where parents went to work and the kids kind of just, they walked to school. We don't see a lot of that now. But that was the time when we walked to school. And I remember my grandma, when I was 7 years old, she walked me to school and one time, day one. And then the following day, she took me to the corner and she says this to me. She said, I'll never forget this. She said, you know how to get there, right? And I looked at her and I said, yeah. And I started walking to school from then on. And, and that was just normal. So it starts off pretty innocently with those things. As a kid, you're not paying attention to a lot of details in life. But after being left unsupervised for several years. And one of the big things is that my mom she was a seamstress. So she worked, to this day, she still works. Mm-hmm. She just, she's from that generation that believes in hard work and doesn't believe in sitting down for a moment.
But you didn't have a very happy childhood, and your father was not a very hardworking person.
No, he was quite the opposite. He was dealing drugs, getting drunk on a daily basis, and then if that wasn't bad, he beat my mom quite often throughout the week. I don't think I ever remember one day of a week where he did not put his hands on my mom in front of me, and so I grew up seeing that, and it does cause some kind of effect on your childhood and how you view things.
It's funny. One of the first quotes that I put, one of my first notes in the book was, you had this quote: "I had friends at school who laughed and had fun on the schoolyard during recess. I didn't know what joy was." And that really pulled me up, because that's an awful admission, and maybe explains a little of what happened to you afterwards. But it's an amazing thing to say. You didn't have joy in your life as a child?
Well, it's just one of those things that you knew that something at a certain point in your young life, you start to really pay attention to certain details, right? I think prior to 7, you're just being a kid. But then you start growing up a little bit older, and you start to pay attention to some things. And one of the things that I did pay attention to is that, number one, there was nothing to be happy about, because I knew I hated home. I really hated going home. I wanted to see my mom, but I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to see my father. And I couldn't see my mom until really late at night, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night she worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 jobs. It was just, I just really despised going home at the end of the day.
So you explain in the book that perhaps one of the reasons why you got involved in gangs was that you didn't have a family, and that actually, bizarrely, these violent, horrible gangs in Los Angeles had sort of a family structure. The kind of people looked out for each other. People, you were part of something, and they almost, in inverted commas, sort of loved each other. There was, you hung out with them. Like when you weren't doing crime, you were hanging out, and you were part of something.
And you had people you looked up to, and people looked up to you as well.
Yeah, I always say this. I do a lot of speaking engagements prior to all this nonsense, in my opinion, of the locking down and all that. I've always shared this, that it's you grow up in an environment that's just so wreaks havoc, and you become like almost dormant in your heart towards certain things, and when the streets start to embrace you, you take a look at that as a young boy, and you go, well, this is family. This is what I wanted to have. This is the belonging, the sense of belonging, the validation. And so the streets, if you don't get that at home, and I think this is so important in today's society, the absence of fathers in the family, it is so destructive when men walk away from their marriages, when men walk away from responsibilities and leave young kids behind. And the thought, I talk to so many men now, and through this time that I've been out, this thought with manhood, that if we provide, then we've done a great job, and that's just a little percentage of what a man is to do. And I think being there and being a part of those kids' lives growing up, it's pivotal on how they become in life, healthy citizens in life.
But so you didn't have that, and you did join a gang. And I have to say, I mean, and for people, and I will encourage people forever to buy your book. And I think I was communicating with you about that yesterday.
It's called The Shot Caller.
And it's available on Amazon, available everywhere, and there's an Audible version of it as well. But really wonderful, but very disturbing, obviously, because you got involved in violence. And it's not just that you got involved in violence, because you even mentioned, and I think you said this when Magda met you in your shop, you said, there are things I did, I wouldn't, I don't even want you to know the worst of what I did. And I think, and you say in the book something like, I can leave it up to your imaginations, but you talk about having a thirst for blood, and you do have descriptions of some of the violence that you got involved with, which are sort of chilling images. I think just very disturbing for me to read anyway.
And two things I'll say is, your book is I was expecting when I read the book that you would gloss over the more violent aspects of it. You find that in a lot of these books that it's just kind of almost the door is closed, but you go behind the door and go into detail. No, it's readable. It's not.
Yeah, that's true. I would say that it's actually readable, despite the fact that it's.
But another thing is, we have to always remember that you did these terrible, terrible, terrible things, but you weren't 16. I mean, they would be terrible for an adult, but for a child to do them is horrific.
It's chilling.
I've read several. Stories of Christians who had, a life that, they had a bad hand to begin with. But it's almost like they sanitize their story in book form. And I think that we've done that so much so that we really don't paint the real picture of some of the life that really happens out there. And when I was working with Mike Yorkie on this, that was a concern with me of, do I put out because there's a lot of stuff in there, and I think the first 8 chapters are pretty rough because it's very descriptive. But what we wanted to do and what I wanted to do is make sure that one, that I didn't glorify it, but two, that we said it the way it happened. Yeah. And why this was important was because we wanted to make sure that, and we were prayerful throughout the whole process. We wanted to make sure that people that have been in the mud, people that have had just atrocious incidents while growing up in their early childhood and even into their young adult life, that they would know that there's still a way out and that Jesus is still there, holding his hands out and ready to save. And that was really our goal. And I think that that goal was met through the shock collar.
You're jumping ahead by mentioning Jesus. I wanted to kind of bring that in a little bit later so at 16 you were sentenced. They got you. They caught up with you, and you were sentenced for 12 years and 8 months of solitary confinement. And I loved, again, I just think there's so much about the book that just feels so real. And I actually, it jumped out on me, the fact that your overwhelming emotion was that you breathed a sigh of relief that they hadn't gotten you for more, that it wasn't longer than that actually you felt that was almost, you were lucky. That you were kind of lucky.
Yeah, and I think that many of us when we come to Christ, or when let me hold back on that because I want you to ask the questions appropriately. Yeah. But we I think every person could look back and go, man, when we think about when we tell people, that's a good guy or that's a good lady, and really, we don't know the real story behind that person. And for me, it was very dark. It was extremely dark. But I look at that and when the arrest happened, I did feel this sense of, all right, well, here we go. This is my portion now, and I gotta step into a world that. Getting sentenced as an adult at a very young age. This was the beginning of California getting tough on crime with teenagers, and rightly so, because it was a bloodbath in the 80s in Los Angeles with gangs. And so I was in that very first portion of young men that were sentenced to adult prisons.
I want you to describe this to people because this really had, so much of the book. I as I said, I could really, there's so much I want to ask you, so many questions I have. But I do think you're this kid, basically, you're 16 and you're sent to what you call New Folsom Prison. And you are put into the SHU program, or solitary confinement. Can you, and I just really do
Well-
think this is, sorry.
Well,
yeah.
first of all, you go to a number of prisoners where you become what's known as a shot caller. You're a leader of a prison gang, isn't that right? You're the guy that holds the knives, holds the shanks, and decides who lives and dies, who gets beaten up, etc. And then, so tell us about what a shot caller is in prison.
A shot caller is exactly how what you just mentioned. It's someone that walks into. It usually starts in as soon as the county jail, but it's such a community. The gang culture is such a small community. As big as it is, you have what we would say like the 1%ers. That these are the guys that are going out there and doing violent crimes against rival gang members, violent crimes against just your regular citizens out there. They're terrorists. I mean, they're street terrorists, and with that comes along this notoriety that your name becomes very. It's almost like a household name on the streets, and for me, that's what really took me up the ranks quite fast. Once I got into the Los Angeles County Jail, and it was there in maximum security that, and in the gang module that I was elected to be a shot caller there. And then when I went to New Folsom, I mean, it's so organized. I don't know how it is now, but at that time it was very organized. They knew other inmates who were of reputable names in there. In the gang culture, they knew who was coming up to what prison. So when I got to New Folsom, they already knew me. And it's that organized. And you would think, how did they get my name on here? They know.
So when you arrived in New Folsom, then were you immediately put into the SHU, into the solitary confinement?
Mm-hmm. Yes. So immediately from the bus, I was escorted to a room, almost like an interrogation room, and asked some questions, and then the gang coordinator in there, along with the warden, decided that I was deemed a danger to the safety of other prisoners in there because of my rank in leadership in there.
And they actually ranked you. The number was out of 100 in terms of violence and in terms of the threat to the rest of the population, and you got a 97, I believe.
That's an A+. In anything, right? That meant I had to go straight into solitary.
So you went to solitary confinement. Can you, I just found this fascinating. Can you describe what the cell was like?
It's an 8x10. To give you a little small picture of it, it's like the size of a parking lot space. You have a sink, a metal toilet. The sink is attached to the toilet. You have a concrete slab where you sleep. They give you about a 2-inch thick mattress. At that time, solitary was very different when I was in there. It's not like how it is now, where you have a cellmate and a TV in there. Back then, that wasn't allowed. So when I got in there, so you got the sheet, a little thin blanket, a roll of toilet paper, and your thoughts, and that was it. Pair of boxers, t-shirts. There was no jumpsuit in there. It was just you're in there 23 hours of the day.
23 hours a day, and then you have no contact with anybody else. I mean, and I think, and you describe really well in the book how some guys just couldn't hack it, and certain ways in which they tried to kill themselves.
Or went crazy.
Or went totally crazy. The guy next door who had the ducks. But I want to move it on because there's so much in this story to tell. But you were there for how long before this little old lady turned up?
Almost 3 years by the time that she walks in there, or about 2.5, somewhere on there. And she walks in there with this little church. It's not some big church. It's a small church that, I could only imagine, and it's a long drive. It's from Los Angeles to Sacramento. So it's not, a comfortable drive, I would think, with a small group of church people. And they'd go there once a month on a Thursday. There was an encounter that I had with this lady that started to change without me knowing what was going to happen next.
It's interesting. I wanted to ask you because I know what she did, and so she said, and she asked the warden or whatever. She asked the guy guarding you, I want who's in there, and don't worry don't bother with him.
Yes.
That's Diaz. You don't want anything to do with that guy.
He's an irredeemable.
And then she said, Jesus Christ came for even that guy, But you rebuffed her. You rebuffed all her efforts for a while. But she said, I'm going to pray for you. And she talked about intercession. I wanted to ask you, so she started to intercede for you. Can you explain what you understand by intercession now?
Well, now I understand that it works. That's one thing. But it's when someone ends up praying for another person so intently that God starts to work on and does the miraculous in the life of someone who is dark, someone who is, that's a great word, irredeemable in our minds, and the Holy Spirit starts to work. And for her, she went to bat for quite a bit of time, interceding for me, and she would always. I remember her asking me. She said, initially, is it okay if I stop by your cell when I come here once a month? And I remember being, I wasn't belligerent, I wasn't rude, I was just very stern with her. And I said, you're fine to do that, but I'm letting you know, I don't want anything to do with what you're trying to sell me. I'm good, and I refused all her, what I thought were antics. But there was this thing in her voice. And that's one of the things I want to share with you guys is that there was something different about her voice. I think her voice at that time, I didn't understand it, but her voice had faith. There was something in her heart that she knew that the God that she served can change my life.
And her name, by the way, is Frances Proctor. And, I kind of don't want to spoil the book for people, by the way, because it's really, really beautiful. And you did make me cry, by the way, many, many times yesterday. And I know Magda, when Magda met you at your shop, she came back immediately and said to us, okay, I've met this guy. He made me cry 3 times. We're like, oh my God, what happened here? But it is a beautiful miracle what happened with her. And I have met those kind of people. Through the work that we have done, we've met people exactly like that, Frances Proctor. And as you say, there is something, they're different. They're different than other people. And they say things like, I will pray for you. And you think, God, this extraordinary thing. I want to move it on to this miracle that happened, this extraordinary thing that happened. So you're alone in your cell. And this is before, I'm sorry now, I'm trying to work out, but this is before the chaplain, right? This is, before the chaplain incident. So you are alone in your cell. It's mid-morning, and I think you're able to tell the time. I mean, all this stuff was crazy to me that you couldn't tell the time really well except for through the meals, because you knew it was obviously after breakfast, and I'm saying breakfast very loosely.
Because your cell had no window.
The light was on all the time.
And the light was on all the time. So this is a cell, this is tell people, where you lived for 2.5, 3 years.
And by the way, and Casey, by the way, says repeatedly in the book, I deserved it.
Yes.
I deserved all of it, by the way.
But it's a cell with no heating, no air conditioning, no window.
And you couldn't tell the time, and he didn't have a timepiece.
And no one to speak to.
And so it's mid-morning, and you're lying on your bunk or whatever, and tell people what happened. I prefer you to tell.
I'm laying down, and it's a normal day in solitary confinement. You're used to the count times when the guards walk up and down the tiers. There's 8 cells on the bottom, 8 cells on the top, and so I'm laying down there, and just out of nowhere, I see what looks like a movie projected on my wall, and some of you, maybe some of your viewers on your podcast or listeners, some of us remember those the old movie reels, that you hear that kind of thing. Well, that was projected on my wall, and I started to see my life being played back as far as I can remember. I mean, these are events that I know that actually took place, and from, I mean, the smallest of crimes that I've ever done, and I'm awake. This is the thing that I want people to know is that I was awake. I wasn't on drugs. I wasn't on anything. I was perfectly sound, And I'm watching this, and then it would break, and I would see this man carrying a cross. And I knew that this person was looking at me. I couldn't see his face, but I knew that whoever's carrying this cross kept looking at me, and I could see the crowds. And I never, ever did someone ever sit with me. No one ever had explained the gospel to me. I knew Jesus, but that was just the name. That was not it. As far as the storyline of what he did and what he came to do, I was clueless to all of that. But so I see this guy, and he's carrying this cross, and I could see the mobs just very angry at this guy, and I didn't understand why. But then it would kind of like close out, and it would go back to my life, and it was documented in perfect order. So as it happened, age-wise and the whole 9 yards, to actual crimes that got bigger and bigger as I got older. And what got me is when let me stop there. When I saw this, again, I'm on my five senses. The first thought that came to my mind after about the, I don't know, second or third footage on this wall was that the cell next door to me, this dude lost his mind and thought that he was hallucinating. The walls caved in on him, and from one day to the other, thought that he had ducks in his cell. Mm-hmm. And so he lost it completely. And he had been in solitary for a long time already. So my first initial thought was, that's it. This is it. This is it. This is where the walls cave in on me. And I saw the nails being driven on his hands, his feet, the cross, the whole 9 yards. And what got to me was, my first name, my legal name, my birth name is Darwin Diaz. And I just despised that name growing up. I didn't like that name. And again, I didn't know about Christianity or anything like that. I just I didn't think it was a cool name. And so on the streets, as a little young boy at 8 years old, I believe, or something like that, I decided to change my name. And I remember, this is a time where kids played baseball and football outside, at night and the whole 9 yards. And I remember getting the kids together and saying, from here on out, you're going to call me Casey. So that name stuck with me to this day. So he's on the cross, and I hear him say, Darwin, I did this for you. And I could see the head just drop, and I could hear, like you could hear me now, I could hear the breath leaving him. And that was something that was so, I understood at close quarters, someone losing their life. And so that dropped me to my knees immediately.
I thought that was very interesting as well, because you knew exactly what that sound was like, because you had been in that place where you had been perhaps the person who had caused that, and that people had you had heard people's last breaths a number of times. So when you heard the life of Jesus going out right in front of your eyes, you recognized that. And so you just got on your knees right then, even though you and I think you described that so well, you didn't even know how to pray, but you got on your knees and started. What did you do?
I remember, and again, nobody had taught me how to pray or anything like that, but I was in the middle of my cell, just weeping uncontrollably. I think one of the things that got me the most was the forgiveness. And it's hard for me to explain it, because, when you've done horrible things to other humans, to people, whether you did it to other gang members or whoever, when you think about what your hands have done and the forgiveness of Christ, his complete forgiveness, his mercy, his grace, that's what broke me. And I didn't understand that's what was happening in my life right there in the middle of the cell. But I remember telling God, and I got very raw, because that's how I thought, I knew that God had did something. And I said, I'm sorry for stabbing this person, and I'm sorry for...
Yeah, yeah. And then shortly, and thank you for sharing. I mean, it's it's an incredible story. I mean, so from that, you then asked to see a chaplain, and I think the guards were like, "What is going on here? What is wrong with you?" And actually, that's kind of interesting in itself, because because I don't want to go through every part of the book, but I'm just thinking of Agent Turner, which comes up later on in the book, and how he said that some prisoners tried it on and did this. Oh, I found religion, and it was just a ruse to try and get out or try to be treated differently. And I think there's a great story with Agent Turner. I'm actually not going to tell that, because I actually really think people should read the book, because the book is so great. But and I don't know, we should move.
Well, I mean,
quite quickly.
tell us how you eventually got out of the by
You
some
got to
miracle.
mainline. You
got to the main part of the prison. How did the gangs react to you declaring yourself a Christian and turning your back on the gang life? Is that acceptable? Was it accepted?
No. In fact, that is the absolute. That's next to going in there as a rat, as a snitch. Those are prison terms. Next to that is someone who debriefs someone that walks away from that lifestyle, and especially when you're a leader, that's going to cause a lot of trouble in your life, and as it did for me, there was a hit immediately placed on my life when I denounced this gang and my role in this prison. And usually what happens is they'll send, if your gang is big enough, or if some of your own gang members are there, it's just a rule of thumb to send that particular inmate along with others to kill you. And so a hit was placed on my life immediately.
And that's an amazing story. I mean, there's that story, and then and I know your life was saved, but then they decided to dispense hard candy, as you describe it, which is where you got these regular beatings for a really long time. And just to move it forward, you then had this, and and I'm really glad, and I want you to mention that, by the way. There is a movie being made about your life, or has been made about your life, and I'm so excited about that, because this reads like a movie script to us. We've obviously made a movie ourselves, and we're like, I mean, this is such a great movie that I want, first of all, I want everyone to read the book, but I also want everyone to watch the movie when it comes out.
Well, tell us about the progress of the movie. Tell us about what you turned down and what's happening now.
Well, we were approached by many folks, with good intentions. I would say some with good intentions, and some, it's Hollywood.
Yes.
It's, in my opinion, untrustworthy of in many ways. And for me, I saw what they did to Zamparelli, and I saw what they've done to many stories where Jesus was, there in part of their life in that book. And then, Hollywood offers very, very, very good money for stories like that. And if you're not careful, you'll sell the rights to that story, and then it could end up on a shelf, or it could be changed and altered to the point where the redemption part is completely gone.
Yes.
And how that person got redeemed is gone. And mainly it's, Hollywood doesn't like Jesus. I mean, that's just plain and simple.
Yeah.
That because it can change lives. I believe that. And
it's interesting that you mention Unbroken, because that really, really strongly resonates with us. I remember reading the book Unbroken.
On Zamparini's.
On the life of what's his first name? Louis Zamparini, who was this incredible athlete from Torrance, Olympic athlete, amazing runner, who then was prisoner of war in Japan, was tortured for years, had an extraordinary release, got back to America. Amazing story. But the really amazing part of the story, and that he believed was the most amazing part of the story, was that, he came back to Los Angeles, he got involved he started drinking, he started behaving really badly, he was terrible to his wife, a horrible guy, and the wife was basically about to leave him. And then she said, as a last-ditch effort, just do one thing for me and come tonight to a revival with Billy Graham, who was doing those revivals all over the United States. And he was converted, and his life completely changed. And he said of his own life that everything about his life was about Jesus, and that nothing else mattered, and all the rest of it. And of course, then Hollywood made a movie, and they basically just left it out. And I'm really glad that so obviously you had read that book and you were thinking, my God, they're going to do that to me. And you know what? They could have easily done that to you. And
so what was
what's happening now instead?
Tell us about the progress.
So we got offered a very substantial amount by a very big movie production, which we turned down immediately. To me, it was more important. It would have been so unjust and so irresponsible of me, I think, to hand my story and the rights to the story to Hollywood, and then sure, I could have walked out with a very good lump sum. That's not what it's all about. I think to me, if someone can come to Christ through my story, through what he did in my life, then that's a better payoff, because that's someone changing their lives and allowing God to do the miracle across the board. So, one of the things that HarperCollins and Thomas Nelson did was they hired 4 PR firms for my story, which is unheard of. Usually authors don't even get one nowadays. The book, the way books are done are very differently now. They want a story that's valid, and it has to an alien dropped in your living room kind of story. Otherwise, you're not getting anything lucrative. But they hired 4 PR firms, and they just went all out on the book, and it ended up in devotionals. My story came out in Bible devotionals across many formats, and in one of them was this morning devotional that was an app, and the owner of Zero Gravity, one of the owners of Zero Gravity, is a believer. And she came outside in the morning with her coffee as normal, and she got her app, opened it, and it was my story. And she went over to her husband and said, we got to get a hold of this guy. And the way she tells the story is pretty cool. She says, he's in bed, half asleep, and she's excited about what she just read. And she says, we got to get this guy an interview. We got to interview this guy. And so he kind of just, does this, what's the story about? All right, go ahead. And she says, oh, it's a guy that came out of prison. And then right when she says that, he says, oh, those are a dime a dozen, and really they are. I mean, there's many of those, right? But she says, no, this is a little different. This is a lot different. So she ordered the book immediately, read it in one sitting, and immediately emailed me. She convinced her husband to email me, and that was the beginning of Zero Gravity. When we sat down with them, we went in there with a team, and to the initial meeting, my business partner, Joel Needler of HarperCollins, and we walked in there, and there was right away there was something that, like, I'm used to hearing God speak, and I know His voice. I know, it's a familiar voice to me when He speaks, and when I'm sitting there, and we're all sharing, I knew that these were the people that were going to carry the story. And so when we sat down and talked logistics, I said, here's the deal, and I don't want to waste anybody's time. The production company that's going to do this movie cannot take Jesus out of this movie at all. You must leave every single detail, and we already had it all in bullet points. That's according to the book. You cannot change these in any way at all. And Jesus must be the reason why I get born again. There's no negotiating this. And if you're okay with that, then we can move forward. And I mean, to see God work in a business meeting like this. There was this is the owner of this company, this big, they made Ozark, and they're very well known. They were weeping, and we wept, and we're in this conference room, and they said, we want this story. We want this story, and we will do it the way you say you want it done. And so right now we're in we're in development. The script is amazing. It is, it mimics the book side by side.
Good.
And of course, there's a little Hollywood in there that they got to do. It's understandable.
Yes.
So we wanted them to have the freedom as well.
Yes.
And it's almost like it's a partnership. I don't feel like it's a business thing. It feels like a partnership with these guys, and I'm very content, very happy that the story is going to be told.
When is it going to come out?
When's it going to be made, and when
released,
production?
So we're in the development phase of it still, but we're thinking here's the other cool part is that they ended up deciding to put this project at the forefront of other projects. So that alone is usually the films take anywhere from 7, 10, sometimes 15, 20 years to make, and then you see it on the screen. But they pressed fast forward on this, and this has become their project of projects here at Zero, and it's amazing.
There's a couple of things I want to do before we're definitely not finished yet. I kind of feel like we stopped the story in a funny spot there, but just to kind of, and I really don't want to sort of spoil the story, but and when I read it, I kept thinking, it is such a movie, by the way. Like when you went, so you used to go for regular parole hearings, and you kind of were like, whatever, I'm never getting out. I'm not getting out of here until I do all my time. And I think even one of the guys who sat on the parole board had like a nickname where it was like, whatever it was, every day, or dog, Mr. No or whatever. But whatever. But he was like, there's no way anything was going to happen. And then a pastor that you knew at that point came and wanted to pray with you pray over you before you went into one of your parole hearings, and you were like, fair enough, thanks, but I'm not getting out of here. And then you went in with him, and the pastor came in with you to the parole hearing, and they asked you, and I just love this. They said, why should we let you out of here or whatever? And you said you shouldn't. And you had this moment where I think you just thought, you know what, I deserve to be here. And you gave this, and the speech is really powerful in the book. And then they said, and it's just, and you made me laugh, by the way. I cried reading the book, but I did laugh as well. And I liked where one of the people on the parole board said to the pastor, I think, are there nice restaurants where you live? And I'm like reading that yesterday with my mouth open going, what's happening here? Which happens so many times in the book. And actually, obviously, on that occasion, you were paroled and you were released, and it didn't work out quite like that. You didn't get out till the next day and stuff. And what happened the day that you did get out, I really am not going to spoil, because that really shocked me. And the book is so powerful, and I love the fact that when you eventually became free, you did go and hunt down Miss Proctor at her church. And she's this little old lady, well, actually, by the way, can I just register an offense here now? Because, so Darwin describes this woman who came to his cell, a little old lady, there's a bit of little old lady. And then it turns out that this little old lady, I think it was at that time, like in her 50s, excuse me.
Not that old.
Just so you know, just a technical issue there, Darwin. That's not a little old lady. Okay, this cat needs to really not toss the camera film.
Yes.
But yeah, just a technical issue on that one. Little bristle there, and I thought, I said I'm going to have words with Darwin about this now. When I get
old is an offensive.
Very
word.
relative. I'm sure you're thinking about it differently yourself. But I would really encourage people to get the book. I was in communication with you last night, Darwin, and I already have written a review on Amazon. And when you do get the book, and when you do read the book, and it's a very fast read, you can read it in a day. Please immediately also, because this is very important, we know this from our own experience, go to Amazon immediately, give it a 5-star rating, and write a review. It really, really matters. Because I'm like that. I look up books on Amazon, and I always look to see, has it got the 5-star rating? How many people have given it the 5-star rating? What have they said? Who's the most recent person who wrote, and all of that? So please make sure you do that. And those of you who don't like reading books, you can get it on Kindle. You can also get it as an Audible book. Who did the audio narration?
It's a gentleman, a Spanish gentleman that did it. It was HarperCollins' choice.
Sure. Okay, great. Because I just think some people quite like to listen to those Audible books, and they usually, if HarperCollins picked someone, they probably have, I'd say the Audible is probably really great, by the way.
Yeah, we've received a lot of feedback from the audio. People really enjoy it and love it. So, the guys at Thomas Nelson and HarperCollins, they have been just a family to me.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah, and we're working on some other stuff with the Shock Collar series as well.
I feel like, by the way, I just feel like we've skimmed the surface today. I feel like we're going to have to meet you again. First of all, we're going to meet you. We're coming to find you, by the way, sir. We're all in Los Angeles here, so we need to meet you. But we'd also quite like to
have you back on.
To have you back on the show. But there's so many things I want to say to you. But I was haunted by the fact that you had a joyless childhood, that you had no joy in your life. And we have a godson, very important to us, Magda's son. And we look at him, and we phone, and she'll put him on the camera, and we look at him, and he is all joy, which is what children should be. And that's a terrible way to start a life. So thank God that you've come through all of that, and that you have found faith, found Jesus, found hope, found peace, and that you're sharing that story with so many people who are not peaceful and who are not. Who are very, very unhappy, and particularly very unhappy at this time. It's a very stressful time in people's lives. So I'd highly recommend the book. Now, we ask all our guests 2 additional questions. So this is kind of a real segue away from what we've been talking about. So do you cook, Darwin?
I am the only one that cooks in my household.
There we go.
We ask people for their favorite recipe, not their favorite recipe, the recipe they're famous for.
What do the family want you to cook for them?
It's a toss-up between the 3-2-1 barbecue ribs that I make and the pulled pork sandwiches that I make. Both having to do with long duration of smoking meat, but when they come out, oh my goodness! I want to say this. We have a Bible study at our home on Friday nights. I think it is the best fed Bible study.
Do you have a smoker? Do you have a smoker at home?
Yes, I actually have what's called a Traeger. And a lot of guys, kind of some of the hardcore guys that do smoking for a living, are now turning to this Traeger movement, and it's just an easier way to smoke your meats, your cheeses, and all that. And so I've enjoyed it, but I love cooking. I am a diehard Food Network guy. That I'm constantly looking at recipes, videos, and I like making food of all kinds. I just don't stick to one.
Tell us about how you make your ribs. What's the sauce?
Tell us about the ribs, because Phelim loves ribs. So let's hear what's the secret.
So the 3-2-1 concept of smoking these ribs are, I season it. I put a lot of seasoning on it. I leave it for 3 hours in the smoker, 3 hours, and then you pull it out, and I put aluminum foil, and I almost kind of make almost like a bag with the aluminum foil. I put my ribs in there, and I add about, I want to say about 3/4, maybe a little bit less, of apple juice in there. I close it and I leave it there for another 2 hours. For 2 hours, and it's just cooking. I mean, it's following that. On the last hour is when I take it out and I take the ribs. Then I start putting all the barbecue sauce on it. I put it back in there for another hour, and so it's now it's been cooking for 5 hours, 6 hours. And when you grab those ribs, the bone just it slides off.
Yeah, yeah.
And the meat is so tender. It's so, you're not, I hate having to work for my food. That's the worst. When you're having ribs and you're fighting against it.
It's un-American.
It's un-American, yeah.
Right? Yeah. I just kind of like, when I go to restaurants and if I'm fighting with my meat, that's it. I'm done. It's like never coming back here again. That kind of guy. But this process, the 3-2-1 concept, is my go-to on ribs, and I mean they just come out so.
Okay, we're going to get. I think we need more information about these ribs. I think we're going to have to talk more about ribs. We may have to cook together at one stage. I love cooking as well. So the other question we ask all our guests is for a piece of art, something that's important to them, like a poem, a movie, a play, a piece of music that's really important to them.
You know what? As far as music, I'm a very contemporary worship music is what my go-to. As far as movies, so here's something that one of my friends, he's in the movie business as well, and he says to me, you ever watch these mafia movies? And I said, actually, I haven't seen one. I haven't watched one. And he said, what? You got to watch Goodfellas. And I said, is it good? And he looked at me like I had just insulted him, right? He says, is it good? You haven't watched, Goodfellas? I said, no, I never even heard of it. And he says, you got to watch it. And so I ended up watching that one for the very first time, I think about a few weeks ago. And I went, wow, that's a pretty good film. It's a little gritty, but very well made. I think the storyline was really, really well. Silence of the Lamb is one of my all-time favorites. But it's just me and my daughter sit down and watch these things, and these ID things. I don't know where she got. I walked into her room one time, and she's watching like the next 48 hours and shows like this. And I walk into her and I said, what are you watching? What are you doing? She goes, and I said, you can see the queue, of all the ones that she's watched, and it's like endless. Yeah. And I said, you watch these? And then she's like, yeah. My best friend is an FBI agent, really cool guy, and who I actually brought back to the Lord a few years ago. And so we've been friends ever since. So he always recommends stuff for me to watch, and so me and my youngest daughter, that's our thing to do is watch these kind of shows.
We just love talking to you today, Casey. It's just been a pleasure, and it's wonderful that we've met you. I think we were telling someone last weekend after Magda had come with the banner and she had met you, and she came down to the beach and she said, "Oh my God, you won't believe who I just met. This is incredible, a story." And then we told other friends of ours on Saturday, and they just immediately said, "Oh yeah, well that's a God thing." And it was like, I thought, yeah, that sounds about right. So thank you, God, by the way, for bringing us together. We just love you, Casey, and we wish you all the very best, and we'd love to keep in touch. We'd like to know more about the movie as it gets developed, as it comes out.
I'd like to know more about the barbecue.
We'd like to know more about the barbecue. So
we got to get you. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So, Casey, well, thank you very much for your time. I wish we could stay longer, but we'll have you back on.
We will have you back on.
Thanks, Casey.
Right. Thank you, Casey.
Bye. An amazing story. I don't think we even touched on half of it, and I know that you actually didn't want funny. We don't want to give there's so many twists and turns in the book.
Yes.
It's always difficult interviewing someone who's got such an amazing book because we don't want to sort of give away the plot turns in the book.
That was my problem because when Magda met Casey Diaz very kindly gave Magda a copy of the book. So I got it first and I started reading it and Phelim was waiting for it. And by the time we got to Casey, Phelim had only started reading it. And I just kept thinking, you'd read quite a lot of it,
yes,
right?
But
I think at the same time, I was like, where are you now? Where are you in the book now? And I actually didn't want him and I don't want to tell you. And that was kind of a problem with interviewing him because I actually think you should read the book because really there are jaw-dropping kind of twists, right?
Yes.
There's reveals that you didn't see coming, and I think
there's Hollywood twists,
and I wouldn't really like to spoil it by that. But by the way, and and they are making a movie of this, and I would really say you could make like 5 movies out of this. You could totally, because there are characters that you will come across when you read the book who there should be an individual movie made about each of them. But he was just really great, and we're putting up on the screen, and I think we put it up earlier. How you find his podcast, but it'll be in the YouTube notes. We'll have that in the notes of the show, exactly where you can find Casey Diaz's podcast, which I've listened to one episode of it, and he has ex-cons, ex-gang members on who have found Jesus, and it's amazing, and it's amazing to look at them and hear them testify.
His name is Casey Diaz, Caseydiaz, or as you people say, Z.
And please, again, I think I mentioned that in the interview, but please also remember always to give him a 5-star rating when you go to Amazon and buy the book, and then leave a comment. Very, very important.
Yes. So crazy California.
Oh God, crazy California.
Why do we live here?
I mean, so long, deep sigh. Gavin Newsom has basically reclosed pretty much everything. So pubs all over California have closed. So have movie theaters. So have museums.
No. So all indoor operations statewide for restaurants, wineries, movie theaters, zoos, museums, card rooms. Well, what's a card room? I don't know. All indoor operations for those. But all bars everywhere, indoor or outdoor, must close all operations. And then, as cases and hospitalizations continue to rise, 30 counties will have to close indoor operations for fitness centers, places of worship, offices for non-critical sectors, personal care services, hair shops and hair salons and barber shops and
I'm just thinking, can I just quickly I'm just thinking of a couple of hairdressers we know, ourselves, right? That we deal with, and it's just, I don't know how people cope with this. I mean, how they can what do they do to try and keep going?
They move to Idaho. That's what they do.
I think they do move to Idaho, and we have a neighbour, as we said before. I think we mentioned that in the show, that we have a neighbour who's going to move to Coeur d'Alene because she's just given up. But Alex Berenson's good on this, right? In terms of why. So by the way, if things are really terrible here in California, then everything should close down, right?
Yeah.
Are things terrible here in California, Phil? Tell us what it's like.
Well, at the moment,
there were 45.
Let's talk about the total deaths, actually.
Okay.
So in the scheme of things, there have been 32,000 deaths, 444 deaths in New York. At the moment, there are 7,000 deaths in California.
In the whole of California. And by the way, we just need to remember and remind people that the population of California is double the population of New York.
There were 15,000 deaths in New Jersey. And, California is now seen as this crazy place, and New York is seen as having solved its problems. This is madness. There is no science or no data for this.
And just actually on that very point that you just made there, Phelim, right? Because now they're beginning to say that New York is this big, massive success case. So, and how would we know if it was? So let's just have a look. So in terms of new deaths in New York, there are 42 new deaths in New York. But of course, California is a basket case. So clearly there must be a huge, huge, massive number more than 42 in a place with double the population. Wouldn't that be? Is that not fair, right? Is that not fair?
Of course.
All right.
And that would justify the closure.
Yes, and here's the number of new deaths in California, 45. 45 new deaths
compared
in
to
California.
42 with New York.
And New York is a success story.
Now, by the time you hear this, a few days from now, or maybe somebody will listen to it over again, the numbers could have changed. But they're not going to change that much. I think at the height of this pandemic, there were 3,000 people dying in New York every night. There are now 45 people dying every night in California. And we don't know the ages of those. We assume that they're old and have comorbidities.
And by the way, I mean, we're not saying for a second, by the
Yes.
way, not for a millisecond, that those deaths don't matter. It's incredibly awful and terrible for those families. But what we are saying is that there are people die. And people die from lots and lots of different things. And if you want to look at what's really killing people in California, heart disease is right up there, and cancer. Do we stop everything because people are dying of heart disease? And by the way, we have a lot of we know a lot of reasons why people get heart disease, and there are things that can be done. So do you stop everything? And in terms of the comparison,
People die of car accidents. Thousands die of car accidents. Do we stop people driving?
and he's doing this, right? So as you said, Phelim, he's doing this statewide bar thing, right? The statewide closing of the wineries, the indoor wine and indoor activity. This will include, by the way, and we were just spent last weekend in Sonoma County. We needed to get out. We just thought, we'll drive up there to wine country, and it's it's depressing actually. I mean, it's a beautiful place, unbelievably gorgeous, and all of that. And here's the thing, right? In the total time of the pandemic, the total number of people who've died in Sonoma County is 16. Again, a tragedy, an absolute tragedy for the people involved in those cases. However, there's almost half a million people living in Sonoma County, and because of those 16 deaths in total
Since the beginning,
they're closing down the whole thing. They're closing down the whole of Sonoma County. And I think the point that we continually make, and we, as you know, have this daily podcast you can listen to every day called The Daily Virus, where we analyze this stuff in a lot more detail. But the point that we make is, and we've said this to people, it's not like people aren't dying from other things. So people are dying from other things, and it's almost like the whole of the focus of people in power is on this one thing that kills people, to the neglect of all the other stuff that kills people. And terrible things kill people, like mental health problems kills people. And we have been doing this over and over and talking about the statistics of the rise in the number of people being admitted to ERs with an overdose. 42% rise in that, according to the Washington Post. Huge, massive rise in the number of people committing suicide, massive rise in the number of people, these kind of, what do they call them, deaths of despair. Even that guy, the really wealthy guy, Phelim, what was this guy named? Bing,
Yes,
guy Bing, who had definitely had a lot of money and whatever. People said, and obviously his girlfriend had died of an accidental overdose last year, whatever. This is a very, very wealthy guy. He knew a lot of people here in town. We live in Los Angeles. He lived in Los Angeles. Apparently he was phoning people up, trying to link up with people, trying to find people to go out with. Yeah. And people are terrified because the media has terrified them. And that guy killed him. He threw himself off a building,
Because he couldn't handle the isolation.
He couldn't handle the isolation.
He was a vulnerable human being, and he couldn't handle the isolation.
So we are not callous about the 45 deaths that happened in the last, 24 hours in the whole of California. My God, we're the very last of that. But what about all the other people who've died? What about all the other multiple deaths that have happened? Not of COVID, but because of COVID.
Because of the panic of COVID.
Because of the panic of COVID, yeah, exactly.
Because of the reaction to COVID.
Yeah, but I mean, we've come to the end of this show because, I mean, this has been a long one, and I'm so glad that we were able to bring Casey Diaz to your home, to your life, because I just think he would do anyone good.
Yes.
And we're having him on again.
Don't forget to listen every day to The Daily Virus. It's a little short start to your day. We get up at 5 a.m. to bring it to you.
And by the way, the way to find it is you just go to the Ann Phelim Scoop on any of the platforms that you listen to podcasts on. Podcast platforms. And it's an audio, audio only.
We try and keep it to 15 minutes and feel...
Basically never.
So it's normally 25, 30 minutes of what you need to know that day about the news and views
so
and madness of the
you should
pandemic. Join
us, and so we'll be here. We'll be appearing all week, by the way. So we'll see you on Thursday. So come join us on Thursday and on Friday and every other day of the week. And thanks very much for tuning in again. Love ya. Take care. Bye bye.